Hey everybody, Tom Leyden with you, Westwood Living Podcast, joined by, once again, Aaron Buczek. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. This one's a bit different than the podcast we did a couple of weeks ago where we were specifically talking about the Rotary Club Pancake Breakfast, which, by the way, was fantastic.
That was a great event.
Well executed. Our president of the Rotary Club of Westwood here. But today we're sitting here watching some highlights of the NBA and NHL playoffs in Aaron's office at Edward Jones, and we're specifically talking about your business and kind of how you've gotten to this point. Most notably, let's start here. You've moved within the last 18 months to this new location. So kind of give us a little bit of a background of just your landing spot here on Washington Street.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey, and I'll even take you back a little bit before how I wound up here, because it kind of speaks to the whole journey that I've been on, I would say, since 2020. And I actually get a kick out of this story because anytime I'm talking to folks about my career and what I do, it starts with how'd you get here and when did you get started. And so my first day at Edward Jones was March 9th of 2020.
Oh, solid start. I'm sure you hit the ground running.
So that was 5 days before the world shut down, right? I started on a Monday, and on Friday, everything went haywire. I had a plan, I had a business plan, and I had all these things lined up. This is what I was going to do. 5 days into my career, that got flipped on its head. I had a whole first act to my professional life. I came from corporate America, and so I had to get licensed. And that added a whole nother element, trying to find testing centers that were open, right, through that COVID pandemic. And so I took some tests in New Hampshire, I took some tests in Massachusetts, I took some in Rhode Island. I went anywhere I could to try to get that taken care of. And so I started my journey here working out of a colleague's office in Walpole. But one of the things Edward Jones does when you get started is you can, quote unquote, put a pin in a town. And I had some friends I went to college with that were from Westwood. I had spent some time here. I knew a little bit about the town. And when I started, it was available. And so I jumped on it, even though I was working in Walpole initially. Westwood was always where I wanted to be. Keep going as I continue to grow my business, working out of my friend's office, my colleague's office in Walpole. I get to the point where I was now ready to open my own office. Real estate in Massachusetts is a little bit different than it is in St. Louis, which is where Edward Jones is headquartered. So it's a challenge to find a location that really checks all the boxes that they're looking for. And so this was something, Islington was still under development at that time. It was starting to take shape, but the Muffin house wasn't here yet, Neroli's, none of that. And so I was fortunate enough that, with some of the folks that were working on it, they were able to carve out some space here for me as well. And I came and looked at it. It was just a concrete slab. The windows weren't even up yet. And so, I trusted that the folks that were in charge were going to build it out and it was going to be beautiful. And I couldn't be happier with how the whole neighborhood turned out. Everybody involved in the Islington development project has done a tremendous job. The area looks amazing. And, I love sitting out in my lobby and you just see all the traffic and all the people. And, I can tell you the moment that Zavarian gets out of school, because the kids just descend on the area. But it's great. It's just there's so much activity. It has an energy to it in this area. Neroli's is a wonderful, and Mike and his team do a tremendous job over there between the deli and the restaurant. And obviously, we love the Muffin house, and so I just couldn't be happier that this is where I landed.
Talk about this time of year. It's going to get even busier with families and parents walking by because you've got baseball starting at Morrison, and that was just kicked off last weekend with the first pitch parade, which is always fun. You talked about the previous life in corporate America. What specifically did you do?
So I've always been in finance, went to school at Bentley, a little bit up 95, and loved finance. I actually spent a lot of time in college. I had internships, Morgan Stanley, American Express. So this was always the career I wanted. Unfortunately, 20 some odd years ago when I graduated, this was a different industry. I was a baby-faced 22-year-old, and my parents, God bless them, they did everything they could to get me through college. I graduated in May, and they said, congratulations, June 1st, you're in charge. Rent, cell phone, car, all of that. And so, this industry back then was structured a little bit differently, and frankly, I needed a paycheck. So I loved finance. I stayed in that world. I worked for a small company in Waltham called Lutan Technologies. That was eventually bought out by Moody's Analytics, a name that might be more familiar to people. And we worked in the structured finance world, which may or may not mean anything to folks. But if you have ever seen the movie The Big Short, that was our world, right? These securities that were backed by mortgages. Everybody thought nobody would not pay their mortgage. That was prior to 2008, right? And that kind of really flipped things on its head. But yeah, that was my world before. Spent 20 years or so in that world. I loved it. You grow to kind of love where you are. But, I always had this in the back of my mind. And, fast forward, like I said, to 2020, some opportunities came about, before COVID was really a thing. And, I had some conversations with my wife. That was certainly not a decision I could make on my own. And eventually we agreed that this was the right thing for the family in the long term. And, I took the opportunity that I had.
So from my perspective, I think some of the keys to a financial planner being successful is relationship building. I know you can do that, right? We've seen that through your role as the president of the Rotary Club here in Westwood. You're a great people person. And then just the knowledge of knowing so many different things about the industry, and that has been evolutionary. And I know for a fact that you have been busting your butt over the last 12 months getting yourself to be officially a certified financial planner. What's that process like? Because even for someone who's so engrossed and entrenched in this business, an incredibly challenging test to get that certification.
It was, it was quite a journey. Again, I'm working, I have a family, I have two little girls, 8 and 10 years old. I have a wife. And so, I was not in a position where I could just put my life on hold and go focus on this test. And so I was able to find a program that actually accelerated the process. So I started studying in August of 2023, and I passed the exam in March of 2024. So, 8 months of intense focus and studying. I did try to block out as much noise as I could. I used to joke about it with people, particularly starting in January of this year. I said there was 3 things that I focused on, and if you weren't one of those 3 things, you probably fell to the back of the line. And that was my family, my clients, and the test, right? That's all I had time for. And it was, from January 1st to March 16th, it was a pretty intense process. I would, if you talk to my wife, she may actually have been more excited than I was when this thing was over, because, we can kind of get back to normal. But, you mentioned about knowledge and how important that is in this industry, right? Especially with the world of the internet and social media. You look at the financial planning world, and just like a lot of things, right? People have the tools and resources. You can be your own financial planner, right? Heck, you can be your own accountant. You can be your own lawyer. You can be your own doctor if you really want to be. And so, really showing folks the value of the knowledge that I have. And the CFP, to me, going through that process, it was 1,000% improvement and increase in the knowledge that I have. And, a question that I get a lot about people say is, what does that mean? What does it mean that now you have your CFP? And because I think most folks look at it like I did when I was in corporate America. I got my MBA when I was working for Moody's. And in that world, it's very linear. You get a graduate degree of any sort, and you get an increase in your pay. It's 1-to-1. And that's not how the CFP works, right? I got my CFP, and that didn't change anything in terms of my salary or income. What it allows me to do is just serve my clients, again, at such a higher level and have such a more broad understanding of the different components of true planning. Everybody thinks that we just manage assets and manage investments, and quite frankly, that's a very important part of what we do. But it's the least important part in the grand scheme of things. And now I just have a lot more knowledge about, estate planning, taxes. Not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, and I always look to bring in those resources where appropriate, but I can have conversations with my clients that I couldn't have before. And so hopefully that opens the door for me to serve them better, and also, serve new clients that now when people see that designation, it means something, and they recognize that, all right, this guy or gal has taken the time to really build their knowledge. And, like you mentioned it, all of these industries are relationships, right? You have no shortage of options when it comes to picking a firm to work with and an individual person, again, across all of those areas. And so I think it just helps build those relationships. Ultimately, people will work with individuals that they get along with and that they enjoy being around. And so, hopefully I'm able to kind of build those relationships.
Give me a general sense of your analysis of the market, whether it be over the last year or over the last 3 years. We've seen so much in terms of the interest rates going sky high and people being locked into a lower interest rate with their mortgage and being, I would guess, understandably conservative about making any sort of move because of that. Right? Why am I going to sell my house where I have a 3% mortgage when I'm going to go buy something else that's at a 6.5% mortgage right now? It doesn't make much sense. How are you navigating all of these crazy, things that have transpired over the last few years?
Yeah, and again, it just gets back to this world of social media and information dissemination. It's happened so quickly now. I joked with people through 2022 and even 2021. I said that I earned a minor in psychology, right? Because I spent so much of my time just talking to people about what's going on, what's driving the markets, why are these things so volatile, how do we stick to our game plan that we had set up? And to me, that's one of the most valuable things that I can bring to my clients is, we live in a world where the stock market is at your fingertips from 9:30 to 4 o'clock. And then even pre-market and after hours when we have a variety of different apps that you can download and get that access. And so for me, I just, having those conversations with people, providing them with information, if we set up a goal and we say, this account is for retirement, or this account is for, a new home or a second home that we want to buy in 10 years. I typically spend in years like that the first few minutes of our conversation just saying, hey, nothing's changed with our goal, right? This money is still something that we're planning on using 10 years from now. So let's not make a knee-jerk reaction based on what's happening today. Can we make adjustments? Absolutely. We'll talk through it and ultimately decide whether or not we want to make changes. But it's a different world. I was talking to somebody earlier today, right? And for those of us that remember what things were like prior to 2020, markets never moved like they do today. A 0.5% move in the markets was a big deal prior to 2020. Now we see markets move both up and down 1.5%, sometimes even 2% a day. And it's normal now. And part of that, again, is the fact that more people have access to it. And the majority of those people invest very emotionally. And so when the markets are going up, they get excited and they buy. And that drives things even higher than maybe they would have gone in the past. And on the flip side of that, when the market's going down, they get nervous. You get that pit in your stomach. And so they sell. And that drives the market, lower than it may have gone in the past. And so especially for some of my older clients that remember life prior to 2020, and this is still foreign to them, that things are moving as much as they do each day, just reassuring them, reminding them, having those conversations that it's okay, this is what's going on, and keeping them focused on the longer term goals that we have, and just reminding them about why we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes you just got to say, turn the TV off.
Yeah. Everything you've just been saying has hit me right in the gut because the volatility, maybe I haven't been as tuned into it as you just described, realizing that it does go up and go down so dramatically, even on a daily basis, because it is jarring. You'll see these figures and say like, oh my God,
yeah,
what just happened? Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. So thank you for that. I appreciate that overview. away from the office, you talked about your daughters and your wife Valerie, and you're making a home and a family here. And what do you like to do?
Yeah, so I like to golf. I've been on the DL to start the season. Again, I had to put off some surgery, but I hope to be back in action by the end of May. My girls are active in some untraditional ways. They do karate. We're getting them into field hockey this year. For those of you who don't know, my wife is a baker, so we're always looking for ways to kind of burn off the excess calories that we
Here, test the sourdough.
Yeah.
Here, test the English muffins.
Yeah, test the cupcakes. So we love being outdoors, and actually the injury I have stemmed from camping. So we get out, we do as much camping as we can. We get out and go for hikes, and we have 3 kayaks. We try to get outdoors, and again, I keep coming back to this topic of technology and social media. Anything we can do to just get out of the house, get the kids away from that stuff. Believe me, my kids spend tons of time on technology, way more than I wish they could. So, we take any opportunities to just get out of the house, get away from it all, and enjoy some of the outdoor resources that we have. That's why I'm looking forward. Next week or the week after, the event that you're having is outdoors.
Yes. Thank you. You set me up for a nice pitch here. Yeah. May 14th at Hale Education at the Community Circle at the Andrew Cucciara Learning Center. I'm looking forward to that too, because the whole point of Hale is to do things outside and be part of nature. So you cross your fingers that Mother Nature's going to cooperate. We do have a tent, but that should be fun because it is just getting out. Bring your bug spray. It's my little. I'll have my citronella candles going, but it will be nice to be out there. So thank you for that. Generally, last comments about how somebody gets engaged with you. Number one, you have the great location. Yeah. Literally, folks, go to the Muffin House, grab a cup of coffee, come knock on Aaron's door, and come say hello. Right?
Absolutely.
It starts there.
It starts there, and you would be surprised, right? Again, in this day and age, a lot of people question, do you need office space, right? Again, COVID kind of opened the door to, hey, we can work from home and be just as effective as we were in the office. If you're going to have an office, a location like this is just as good as it gets. And, when I first got here, you don't think financial advisors, financial planning is something that people just pop in or stop by. But believe it or not, I have had more than a handful of clients, whether it's because, foot traffic and they walk by and just stop in. I've had some people reach out and say, I drive by your office every day on my way to work. I think it's a sign. Let's get together. And so absolutely, you can find me online on the Edward Jones website, on the CFP website, or again, if you're grabbing lunch or breakfast in the area, just pop in and we can find a time to connect. It's that easy.
Very cool. That is Aaron Buczek. That is Buczek. Always a little tricky. I've got it, though. I have mastered the spelling of the last name.
Think Johnny Buczek. Unfortunately, he's not my uncle. It sounds the same, just spelled differently.
That is Aaron Buczek from Edward Jones. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Westwood Living Podcast. As always, if there's somebody else you want me to have a conversation with, just reach out. Send me an email to tleyden@bestversionmedia.com. I'll connect with that person and then share that episode right here on the Westwood Living Podcast Network. But for now, from Islington Center with Aaron Buczek, I'm Tom Leyden saying so long and thanks for listening.